Victor Santiago was not just a detective, he was a singular mind amidst a chaotic world. His methodical and almost obsessive way of analyzing details that no one else saw made him an almost mythical figure. Imagine someone capable of reconstructing a crime scene from a mere stain on a piece of fabric. He always had a notebook at hand, where he jotted down everything, from people's tone of voice to the nuances of light in environments. It wasn't uncommon to see him standing in a corner, staring into nothing, connecting seemingly loose pieces of the puzzle. For him, the world was not just what was seen, but what was hidden between the lines. With a keen eye and a seemingly limitless memory, Victor stood out not only for his intelligence, but also for the way he captivated those around him. His methods, however, were anything but orthodox. He preferred listening to a street vendor in the square over blindly trusting official testimonies. People lie, but the context never lies, he used to say, with a slight ironic smile. This made him a walking enigma, someone who challenged rules without breaking them, creating a mix of admiration and skepticism in those who worked with him. Victor's genius, however, came with a peculiar trait: a constant restlessness. It was as if silence bothered him, and he needed to fill it with the next great discovery. For him, solving a case was not just a matter of work, it was a purpose, a way of understanding what moved people, and, in a way, himself. His name, already famous in professional circles, was about to gain even more notoriety with the new case awaiting him, laden with enigmas that promised to challenge even his brilliant mind. The night was dense, almost palpable, as Victor arrived in the isolated small town. His car's headlights could barely pierce the fog that enveloped the surroundings like a veil of secrets. The narrow, winding streets were lined with old mansions, whose windows looked like dark eyes silently observing. The sound of his footsteps echoed, amplifying the feeling of solitude, while the aroma of damp wood and earth filled the air. It wasn't just a place. It was almost an entity, alive, breathing mystery on every corner. The main mansion, where the case would begin, had an unsettling grandeur. Its walls were covered in ivy, and the gargoyles carved at the ends of the roof seemed to watch every movement. The lights flickered in yellowish tones, as if hesitant to illuminate something so dark. As he crossed the rusted iron gate, a long, melancholic creak echoed, making Victor hesitate for a brief moment. Something rare for him. It was the kind of place where every sound seemed to carry a story, but no one dared to tell it aloud. Inside the mansion, the details were even more disturbing. The wooden floorboards creaked with every step, while old portraits hung from the walls, watching anyone who dared to enter. A huge fireplace cast dancing shadows on the furniture covered with white sheets, suggesting that something had been abandoned in a hurry. Victor didn't need much to realize. That place held secrets, but that was exactly what made him feel at home. Every detail there seemed like an invitation to the game he was about to unravel. Victor had barely crossed the mansion's threshold when he was greeted by a sealed envelope on the central table. The yellowish paper and red wax seal suggested something old, carefully preserved. Upon opening it, he found a coded message with symbols that seemed to blend mathematics and art, as if defying any common logic. Additionally, there was a single clue attached: a faded photograph of a group of people, where faces were circled but no names were listed. He knew the case wouldn't be simple. In fact, that was exactly what intrigued him. The story behind the envelope soon began to take shape through the accounts of local residents. A series of inexplicable events had haunted the community in recent months. Mysterious disappearances, sounds in the surrounding forest, and the discovery of an ancient safe buried on the outskirts of the mansion. No one dared to open it, but everyone seemed convinced that the safe held something of value or danger. Victor understood that there was more at stake than the inhabitants' fear. That mystery called for a mind like his, someone who could find the thread. As he analyzed the first clues, Victor noticed something peculiar. The symbols in the message alluded to ancient occult practices, but with a modern twist, as if someone was trying to simulate the past to cover up something present. Once again, his ability to see the obvious behind the extraordinary would be essential. He knew this case was more than it seemed. It wasn't just about unraveling a secret, but about understanding the intentions behind each action. And with that, the challenges were just beginning. Victor began to scour the mansion with the precision of a surgeon, and it wasn't long before something seemingly insignificant caught his attention. On the floor, near the fireplace, he found a golden feather, broken at one end. At first, it seemed like a simple decorative object, but its location was strange. There was nothing around to justify its presence. Victor knew that misplaced objects were often the best clues. With a discreet smile, he put the feather in his notebook, certain that it would prove useful later. Upon investigating further, he discovered that the feather corresponded to an exclusive set of handcrafted inkwells, produced only by an old local manufacturer whose shop had closed decades ago. This connection led Victor to question, how could something so rare end up there? A visit to the manufacturer's old address revealed more than he expected. Among the ruins of the workshop, he found old order records, and one specific name appeared several times, one of the mansion's former owners. This transformed a mundane object into a direct link to the place's history. What intrigued Victor most was the condition of the feather. The break suggested recent use, indicating that someone was trying to hide or encode something. To him, it was as if the object carried not only clues from the past, but also a message from the present. This initial discovery, however simple it seemed, already pointed to deeper layers in the mystery. He knew that each piece found was one step closer to understanding the truth, and perhaps to facing something he was not yet prepared to confront. As he followed the clues left by the golden feather, Victor had to cross paths with the eccentric villagers. First, there was Donna Yvonne, the retired librarian, who seemed to know more than she admitted. She was a living archive of local stories, but her eyes, always darting away, suggested secrets that could compromise her safety. In contrast, there was Dario, the young heir to a decadent fortune, who seemed more interested in maintaining the mansion's facade than in revealing its stories. Each of these characters carried a piece of the puzzle within them, but who was truly willing to give it up? Donna Yvonne, for example, mentioned in passing a missing book from the library that contained codes similar to those found in Victor's initial message. However, when he asked more, she fell silent, leaving the impression that something or someone intimidated her. Dario, on the other hand, between sips of wine, laughed at the idea that a simple detective could understand the complexity of local history. But was he hiding something, or just underestimating Victor? You wonder. The two, with their conflicting behaviors, brought more doubts than answers, which, for Victor, was fertile ground to advance the investigation. Still, the most unsettling question remained. Who among the characters was truly telling the truth? It was clear that the story Victor was trying to piece together was much bigger than it seemed, and the motivations of each individual were still hidden under layers of distrust. But this only reinforced his determination to find out who was on his side and who was playing against him. As Victor explored the village and interacted with its residents, the environment seemed to conspire to heighten the mystery. The nights were marked by an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant howl of the wind, which made the trees sway as if whispering secrets. During the day, the shadows cast by the heavy clouds seemed to stretch longer than usual, as if the scenery itself was alive and attentive to the detective's every step. For Victor, it was like walking inside a book that was still being written, but by whom? Strange events also seemed to follow the detective like a shadow. One night, while organizing his notes in the mansion, he heard slow, dragging footsteps upstairs, but upon investigating, he found only empty corridors and accumulated dust. Even the minor details, the creaking floorboards, the slight sway of curtains even without wind, conspired to create an almost unbearable tension. It was impossible to ignore. The mansion was not just a setting, but a crucial character in this story, carrying decades of silence and secrets within its walls. Victor knew that the suspense was not accidental. It was a mechanism. Someone, or something, was using fear to distract his attention or slow down his search. The challenge, for him, was not just to resist the oppressive environment, but to use it to his advantage. Every shadow, every sound was a disguised clue. But amidst all this, the real question hovered like a fog. Would it be possible to trust his own perceptions when everything around him seemed to be against him? As he explored the mansion with his trembling flashlight, Victor found something that seemed like a simple detail but carried significant weight. A small wooden box hidden behind a loose panel in the wall. Inside, there was an old diary with partially burned pages. The remaining text was full of enigmatic descriptions and references to symbols that matched those in the initial message. Victor carefully leafed through the pages, feeling that the plot was unfolding before him. The diary seemed to belong to the mansion's former owner, who mentioned secret meetings with a group of people whose intentions were still nebulous. More intriguing, one of the names mentioned was Dario, the young heir whom Victor had recently met. The discovery not only complicated the story, but also raised suspicions about Dario's involvement in something much larger than he had let on. Victor knew that the connection between the present and the past was becoming clearer, and that the diary was another fundamental piece. But the question echoing in his mind was inevitable. What was this group really planning? And how was Dario connected to all of this? The revelation of this new clue was not just a breakthrough, but also an invitation to delve even deeper into the mystery. What had started as a simple investigation now seemed much more intricate. What would Victor find by following this trail? And what truths did the diary still hide? Victor knew that unraveling mysteries meant traveling through time, connecting the dots between what was and what is. As he leafed through the diary and analyzed the clues discovered so far, he noticed a reference to an event that occurred decades ago, a mysterious fire that consumed part of the mansion and led to the death of a member of the original family. The story had been hushed up by the villagers, but the detective felt that this was the starting point of everything. The past was not just haunting, it was screaming for attention. Determined to follow this new trail, Victor visited the archives of the small local town hall. Among dusty records, he found a newspaper article dated from the time of the fire. The descriptions were vague, but mentioned rumors about clandestine meetings in the mansion, gatherings that blended science, art, and the occult. These accounts began to transform the case into something much deeper. It wasn't just a crime, but a convergence of historical and personal events, where every action from the past seemed to echo in the present. The most disturbing connection emerged when Victor linked the diary's symbols with the records found. They were part of an ancient language used to guard valuable secrets. Whoever was behind this system wanted the answers to remain buried, literally. But, by piecing together the evidence, Victor knew he wasn't just solving a case. He was unearthing truths that many would prefer to leave in oblivion. And with that, the questions began to align with answers that were hidden in plain sight. Victor was beginning to feel the weight of the case with every step. As the pieces aligned, opposing forces also emerged. One night, while reviewing his discoveries in the mansion, he heard a metallic sound coming from outside. Looking out the window, he saw only shadows that seemed to dance in the dim light. But a feeling of being watched never left him. He knew he was dealing with something dangerous. Perhaps someone didn't want him to get too close to the truth. But who? And why? At the same time, his relationships with the characters he had met began to deteriorate. Donna Ivone, normally friendly, suddenly became evasive, avoiding questions about the village's past. Dario, on the other hand, began to contradict himself, mentioning details that didn't make sense with the records found. Victor realized that the pressure was starting to affect everyone involved, creating an atmosphere where no one was trustworthy. He was moving on fragile ground, where a single misstep could cost more than just the case. The tension reached a new level when Victor discovered that someone had tampered with his notes. Entire pages of his notebook were torn out, and a single word was left on one of them: stop. Was it a warning or a threat? Victor knew that stopping was never an option. The real question he needed to answer now was, how far was he willing to go to uncover the truth? And what would it cost him? Victor was starting to connect the dots, but he was taken by surprise by a discovery that changed everything. Upon reviewing the historical records once more, he found a document that completely contradicted the initial narrative about the fire. It had not been an accident, but something deliberate. The clues pointed to the involvement of someone close to the original family, someone who might have had a very clear motive to erase certain secrets. This new information shifted the focus of the investigation, introducing suspects who had previously seemed irrelevant. Even more surprising was the emergence of an unexpected character, a man named Raul, a stranger who claimed to be a descendant of one of the fire's victims. Raul brought with him old letters that confirmed the involvement of the secret group mentioned in the diary. He said he had returned to the village to seek justice, but something about his demeanor seemed too calculated. To Victor, it was as if Raul knew more than he was letting on, and his arrival was not just a coincidence. Who was Raul, after all? An ally or a new antagonist? This twist not only complicated the case, but also challenged Victor to reconsider everything he had discovered so far. He knew that the case had more layers than it initially seemed. But this new perspective raised a crucial question. If the truth was beginning to emerge, why were so many still fighting to bury it? With more questions than answers, Victor knew he was approaching the heart of the mystery. But at what cost? The heart of the mystery began to pulse when Victor noticed a pattern among the clues. The golden feather, the diary's symbols, Raul's letters. Everything seemed to revolve around a single object. The safe buried on the mansion grounds. The safe, mentioned in various clues and accounts, was described as being protected by a complex code that no one had been able to decipher. Victor knew this was the critical point of the case. What was hidden there could be both the answer and the trigger for something even darker. By observing the diary's symbols and cross-referencing them with historical records, Victor began to assemble a puzzle that went beyond the visible. The combinations were not just numbers, but a fusion of astronomy, religion, and mathematics. Each page of the diary seemed like a piece of the code, and each symbol revealed a story. The logic behind the safe was clear. Only someone who deeply understood the secrets of the secret group would be able to open the safe. Victor couldn't help but ask, what were they protecting with such zeal? And why now? As he worked on the enigma, the weight of history seemed to fall upon his shoulders. The safe was not just a physical object. It was a portal to understanding the forces that shaped the case, the village, and even the people around him. Victor knew he was close to unraveling the secret, but he also felt that whatever was inside the safe would change everything. But the real question hung in the air. What happens when the enigma is finally solved? And was Victor truly ready for that answer? After hours of deciphering the symbols and combining patterns, Victor finally managed to open the safe. The metallic click resonated through the mansion like thunder amidst the silence. And what was inside made his mind race. There, wrapped in ancient cloths, was an unusual artifact, a small sculpture made of a material that appeared to be gold, but with traces of an unknown composition. The figure represented an ancient symbol, which Victor recognized from one of the diary's diagrams. But the most intriguing was the presence of inscriptions around the base, indicating a hidden message. As he wiped the dust from the sculpture, Victor discovered that the inscriptions were coordinates, leading to a specific location outside the village, in the nearby hills. It was as if the safe was not the final destination, but a starting point for something even greater. Questions began to arise in his mind. Who placed the artifact there? And why hide something that clearly had such profound meaning? The feeling that someone was constantly one step ahead of his investigation was disturbing, but it also fueled his determination. The unexpected discovery was a turning point. It wasn't just about what was in the safe, but what it represented. A legacy, a message, or perhaps a warning. Victor knew he needed to follow the coordinates and discover what else was being hidden. But he also realized that solving this case would require not only logic, but courage to face the unknown. After all, who or what was waiting for him at the next destination? As he followed the discovered coordinates, Victor arrived at an unexpected location, an old ruined chapel hidden among the hills. The place had an aura of abandonment, but it also seemed carefully preserved, as if someone still frequented it in secret. Upon entering, he was surprised by Raoul, the man who claimed to be a descendant of the fire's victims. But this time, Raoul was not alone. Before him, there was a small group of people, all wearing intricately decorated masks. Observing Victor as if they had been expecting him, Raoul stepped forward and revealed his true intentions. He was not just a descendant seeking justice, but the current leader of the secret group Victor had been investigating. The artifact from the safe, Raoul explained, was the final piece to complete an ancient ritual, something that, according to him, could restore the forgotten order of the village. The tension between the two was palpable. Raoul offered an ultimatum. Victor could join them or leave and forget everything he had discovered. But, of course, Victor was never one to accept orders so easily. The confrontation reached its peak when Victor, in a swift movement, revealed that he had discovered something more about the artifact, a detail that even Raoul didn't seem to know. The artifact was not just a symbol of power, but also a record of betrayals within the group itself. This caused the masks to begin to fall, literally and figuratively. Victor found himself surrounded, but he also knew he had something the group feared: the knowledge to expose the whole truth. The question echoing in his mind was clear: how far would Raoul be willing to go to keep the group's secret intact? With the atmosphere tense and eyes fixed on him, Victor began to expose the truths he had gathered. The group led by Raoul was not just a circle of curious individuals or researchers. It was a society that had manipulated the village's history for generations. The secret meetings, the symbols, and even the mansion fire were part of a larger plan to protect an artifact that, according to Raoul, contained ancestral knowledge capable of changing the destiny of whoever possessed it. But the motivations didn't stop there. Raoul saw the artifact as a key to restoring his lineage's lost power. Raoul, however, was not the only one with interests in the case. Victor discovered that the group was internally fragmented, with some members questioning Raoul's intentions. They feared that the pursuit of power would end up destroying the balance they had tried to maintain for so long. The artifact, it seemed, not only brought answers, but also revealed the worst side of human ambition. Victor, with his perceptiveness, realized that the internal division could be his greatest advantage to get out of that situation. The true motivation, however, was even darker. Raoul wanted to use the artifact not to preserve the past, but to control the future of the village, shaping its decisions and even manipulating its residents. Victor knew that exposing this truth would not be easy. How to convince people that their greatest enemy was disguised as a savior? This was the question that now guided him. He would need more than logic. He would need to touch the emotions and fears of those around him. As Victor finished exposing the hidden truths, Raoul realized that his leadership over the group was threatened. The tension in the atmosphere turned into hostility when Raoul, in a desperate gesture, ordered his followers to capture Victor. In an instant, the detective found himself surrounded, with all exits blocked. He knew the situation was critical, and that any wrong move could cost him his life. It was like being inside a carefully planned trap, where every detail seemed to conspire against him. Despite the danger, Victor remained calm. He used his own knowledge of the group members to plant doubts among them. "Do you all really agree with what Raoul is doing?" he asked, in a tone that mixed confidence and provocation. The question, although simple, was enough to initiate a suspicious exchange of glances among the followers. Victor knew that the seeds of distrust had already been planted before, and now they were beginning to sprout when he needed them most. The moment of greatest risk came when Raoul, realizing he was losing control, tried to use the artifact against Victor, threatening to destroy it if he didn't surrender. But Victor, always one step ahead, revealed that the artifact had a peculiarity. It only worked for those who fully understood its meaning, something Raoul clearly did not comprehend. This detail bought Victor time, but he knew the situation was far from resolved. The real question now was how to get out of there with the truth and his own life intact. When everything seemed to be on the verge of collapse, Victor made an unexpected move. He handed the artifact to Raoul. The group, perplexed, watched as Raoul held the object with a mix of triumph and distrust. "You think you're in control, but do you understand what you truly hold?" Victor provoked, with an almost defiant smile. Raoul, impatient, tried to activate the artifact's supposed power, but nothing happened. At that moment, the leader's confident facade began to crumble. The true key to the mystery, Victor knew, lay in the inscriptions Raoul had ignored. While the group focused on Raoul, Victor revealed a secret he had discovered in the diary. The artifact was a trap, created to protect the group's secrets. It emitted a signal when improperly manipulated, a mechanism that alerted the mansion's residents about intruders or betrayals. As soon as Raoul tried to force the object to function, a deep echo reverberated through the hills, activating a long-forgotten security system. Hidden doors began to open, revealing passages and secrets that the group did not expect. Chaos ensued. The group, divided between loyalty and fear, began to openly question Raoul, and some even turned against him. Victor, taking advantage of the confusion, managed to escape through the newly revealed passage, taking with him documents and evidence that proved everything he had discovered. In the end, the twist was not just about exposing the group's secrets, but about proving that true power lay in knowledge and truth, something Raoul never managed to understand. The question that had lingered until now, who was truly in control, was answered clearly. The one who knows the truth will always be ahead. Victor returned to the mansion the following dawn, now carrying the evidence he had sought. He knew that the case was not just about the artifact or the group's secrets, but about the impact of their actions on the village and its inhabitants. With the documents in hand, he met with the residents, exposing the events that had been covered up for generations. The fire, the secret meetings, and even the recent disappearances had a direct connection to Raoul's group. But the biggest revelation was this: the true value of the artifact was never in its supposed power, but in the fear it inspired. The village's reaction was mixed. Some residents, like Donna Yvonne, felt relieved to finally understand the mysteries that had surrounded them for so long. Others, however, didn't know how to deal with the truth. Dario, for example, disappeared from the village, unable to face the implications of his connection to the group. Victor, on the other hand, felt a mix of accomplishment and weariness. Solving the case brought not only answers, but also the emotional weight of knowing that some mysteries should never have been unearthed. In the end, the mansion stood empty again, but with a new meaning. For Victor, it was no longer a symbol of secrets and lies, but of learning and revelation. The case, now closed, was proof that, however complex a mystery may seem, there is always a path to the truth, even if it comes with scars. Victor's next step was clear: to continue his work, for he knew new enigmas always awaited him. But a doubt still lingered in the air. What else could be hidden in the village's shadows? Victor's revelations echoed through the village, like the sound of a bell, loud and impossible to ignore. Donna Ivone, previously so hesitant, found a sense of relief in the exposed truths. She began to revisit the library's records with a new perspective, determined to preserve the village's true history, without the filters of the lies that had been told. Dario, who carried a legacy stained by secrets, chose the path of exile. He left the village without warning, preferring anonymity to facing the consequences of his actions. Raoul, on the other hand, faced what he feared most, the loss of control. The group he led quickly disbanded, with members scattered or deciding to restart their lives away from the weight of intrigue. His downfall was not just a physical defeat, but also a moral ruin. The man who believed he had absolute power found himself alone, consumed by his own ambitions. He not only lost the artifact, but also the trust of those who followed him. A destiny that, for Victor, was the true lesson of the case. Power without purpose is a trap. For the villagers, the consequences were both liberating and uncomfortable. Living without the mysteries and fears that dominated their lives brought a new light, but it also required courage to face the future without the old shackles. And Victor, observing the changes, realized that his role was not just to unravel mysteries, but also to be a catalyst for people to confront their truths. However, as the village adjusted, a question remained. What would each person do with their newfound freedom? Victor knew that the mysteries he unraveled always carried lessons, but this particular case seemed to echo something deeper. He realized that the search for truth is not just about answers, but about courage. Courage to face the unknown, to expose what is hidden, and, most importantly, to accept the consequences. Raoul's group sought power, but true power, Victor learned, lies in clarity, in the ability to see the world for what it is, without the veils of illusion. And that, often, is harder than solving enigmas. The village also learned its lessons. The residents discovered that living under a cloak of secrets never brings true peace. The fire, the fear, and even the exaggerated respect for the mansion were the result of a history that had never been confronted. With the truth exposed came initial discomfort, but also a new chance to restart. It's as Victor reflected upon leaving the village. The truth can be hard, but it's always better than the darkness of doubt. In the end, Victor himself was transformed. Each case left its mark, but this one reminded him that the greatest mystery is the human heart, with its motivations, secrets, and desires. What began as a simple investigation revealed layers of history and humanity that the detective would never forget. The great lesson, he knew, was not just for him, but for everyone who would hear this story. Do we have the courage to face the truth, even when it threatens to change us forever? As he left the village, with the rising sun illuminating the hills, Victor found himself lost in thought. Each case brought its own challenges, but this one had been different. He not only unraveled secrets, but also touched the lives of people who were trapped in the past. How many times do we cling to what has passed, as if it were safer than facing the unknown? Victor reflected, looking at the mansion that now seemed less intimidating and more human. Truth, he knew, is a solitary path, but an essential one. Victor also thought about the choices each character had made throughout the case. Raoul, with his ambition, ended up being a victim of his own blindness. Donna Ivone, even hesitant, found purpose in preserving the village's true history. And Dario, who fled, perhaps needed time to deal with the revelation. Victor knew he was not just a solver of mysteries. He was also a witness to human complexity. Every person he met carried a piece of the larger puzzle that is life. Finally, Victor turned his thoughts to himself. What would I have done in their place? He questioned. Perhaps he would never have the answers. But he knew that each case was a chance to grow, to understand a little more about human nature. He knew that life, like the mysteries he solved, was made of questions, some with clear answers, others that would remain open. But that, Victor thought, is what makes it all so fascinating. And as a new road opened before him, he knew that more questions awaited him. Upon returning to his apartment in the city, Victor found an environment that seemed almost strange after the intense days in the village. His office, once cluttered with documents and maps, now seemed empty, as if the silence screamed. He sat in his favorite armchair, with coffee in his hands, and began to review the case notes. The mansion, the residence, and the artifact were still fresh in his mind, but now they were part of a file to be stored. Routine returned to occupy space, but he knew it wouldn't be for long. The small daily things began to resume their place. Victor received a call from an old client, asking for help with a seemingly simpler mystery, something related to a lost inheritance. He smiled, remembering how each case seemed trivial at first, but always ended up revealing unexpected layers. The detective knew that, even as he tried to return to normalcy, the next complexity was already forming somewhere, waiting for him. The pause, he understood, was just an intermission between adventures, but the return to normalcy also brought reflections. Victor realized that, despite the physical and emotional exhaustion, he could not live any other way. Mysteries were not just a job, but a calling, something that kept him alive. As he organized his things, he looked out the window at the city skyline and thought, how many secrets are still hidden out there, waiting to be revealed? And with that, Victor knew that, even in his routine, the excitement of a new enigma was never far away. Despite preferring discretion, Victor could not avoid the recognition that the case in the village brought. Soon, stories began to circulate, passing by word of mouth among the residents and reaching even nearby cities. The detective who unraveled the mansion's secrets was the title that now accompanied him like an invisible medal. For many, he had done more than solve a mystery. He brought to light truths that changed lives. And, although he didn't seek applause, Victor knew that this kind of impact was the true measure of his work. People who crossed his path began to see him differently. Even Donna Yvonne sent a letter thanking his courage and determination, saying that, because of him, she finally found peace to move forward. Other detectives and journalists began to seek him out, curious about his methods and wanting to learn from his unique approach. Victor, true to his style, shared the credit with the mystery itself, saying that it's the secrets that find us, not the other way around. But it was impossible to deny that his methodical mind and empathy had made all the difference. The recognition also brought new challenges. Each compliment seemed to create greater expectations for the next case, as if the world itself was calling him to solve even more complex enigmas. Victor, however, saw this as fuel, not a burden. After all, he knew that, to continue unraveling the unknown, he needed to keep the flame of his curiosity alive. And as he read the thank you notes that arrived, he couldn't help but wonder, would his next challenge live up to everything he had already faced? Despite all the answers revealed, Victor knew that some mysteries remained in the shadows. The artifact, though deactivated, still carried an aura of unanswered questions. Who truly created it? And what was the extent of its original purpose? Even with the records in the diary and the inscriptions on the object, there seemed to be gaps that even the most brilliant detective could not fill. Victor understood that sometimes questions are not meant to be fully answered, but to remind us that the unknown will always be present. The village also held its own secrets. Some residents still refused to talk about the past, as if there were more things hidden under the hills or within the mansion's walls. Raoul, even defeated, did not reveal everything he knew, leaving open the possibility that other members of the group might be operating in the shadows. Victor couldn't help but have an unsettling thought. Was the case truly closed, or merely dormant, waiting for the right time to re-emerge? This ambiguity, however, was not something that bothered him. For Victor, it was an essential part of his journey as a detective. Each answer generated new questions, and it was this dance between the known and the unknown that motivated him to move forward. "Perhaps we will never know everything," he reflected as he recorded his final notes. But what he knew for sure was that the search for truth, even if incomplete, is what keeps us curious and alive. As Victor organized his thoughts about the case, he knew that what had happened in the village was more than a simple mystery solved. It was a powerful reminder of what makes us human, the need to seek, understand, and confront the truth, even when it is uncomfortable. For him, this story was more than an account of secrets unraveled. It was a lesson about courage, resilience, and the importance of not ignoring the questions that trouble us. After all, how many times do we choose silence instead of questioning what truly matters? Victor believed that we all have our own internal mansions, places where we hide memories, truths, and even fears that we prefer not to face. But he also knew that, to grow, one must have the courage to explore these dark corners. It's not just about solving external mysteries, but about understanding the nuances we carry in our own stories. And you, he might ask, what is still kept in the shadows of your own mansion? As he concluded his notes, Victor left a reflection. Truth, though difficult to face, is always liberating. It's not about controlling or possessing power, but about understanding and accepting who we truly are. And, as the world presents us with new enigmas, the question he leaves echoing is this: are we ready to face them with the same determination? As Victor put away his final notes on the shelf, an envelope unexpectedly arrived at his door. There was no sender, just his name written by hand in elegant calligraphy. He opened it cautiously, finding inside an old photograph of a place he didn't recognize. On the back, a single sentence was written: "Not all secrets are buried." It was a clear reminder that, however much a case ended, the next was already lurking, waiting to be unraveled. Victor stared at the photo for a few moments, trying to decipher what that new mystery could mean. The place seemed distant, surrounded by mountains and a river that snaked through the landscape. Something about that image seemed deliberate, as if it were an invitation, not just an enigma. He smiled, already feeling the familiar excitement of a new journey. After all, a detective's work is endless. Each answer leads to a new question, and each solved mystery merely opens the doors to others. As he put on his coat and packed his bag, Victor thought about the last words left on the note. Not all secrets are buried could be a warning, a challenge, or even a provocation. But, for him, it was the beginning of another story, one that promised to be as complex and revealing as the previous ones. And so, with his gaze fixed on the horizon, Victor Santiago departed again, leaving behind only one certainty: the next case was already waiting, with all its questions and twists. And now, after everything that has been revealed, a question persists. What truly makes a mystery worthwhile? It's not just the discovery of answers, but the impact they have on the lives of everyone involved. Victor Santiago unraveled more than secrets. He showed that truth, however painful or complex, is the only way forward. But was everyone in the village ready to face what was exposed? This is a lesson that echoes beyond the mansion's walls. Each character carried their own burden throughout this journey, and the choices they made reflected both weaknesses and strengths. Raul lost the control he believed he had, while others found the courage to start anew. Victor, in turn, emerged transformed, aware that each mystery he solves leaves a piece of him behind and gives him something new in return. And you? What would you do if you encountered a secret so profound that it could change everything around you? The story of Victor Santiago ends here, but the mystery never truly ends. The questions he leaves behind remain alive, waiting for answers, or perhaps just acceptance. After all, it's not the resolution of an enigma that matters, but what we learn while trying to solve it. The silence that remains after the truth is often more powerful than any word. And with that, Victor departs for his next adventure, carrying the certainty that the unknown will always have something new to teach.